Hi, my name is Sandy Borriello. I'm a legal administrator and independent consultant for law firms. For over 20 years now, I've served the legal profession working directly with attorneys and managing shareholders in their evolving effort to develop a practice by managing all aspects of firm business and administrative operations. I've worked with sole practitioners and in-house for small firms, mid-sized boutique practices, and large international firms supporting various practice groups where I've contributed to the strategic and business development plans for firms experiencing growing pains, organizational restructuring, and downsizing during economic downturn. Administrators such as myself serve as the liaison between attorneys, staff, clients, and vendors to ensure that the proper people, policies, and practices are in place for your office. It's crucial that all legal managers in a firm remain apprised of the changing laws and trends within our industry to ensure their respective firms are maintaining a competitive market edge, essentially affording attorneys the opportunity to do what they do best, practice law. And with a well-thought-out business plan and someone managing your day-to-day operations, attorneys can further focus on their cases, networking, developing referral business, and still maintaining client relationships. I've served on the board of directors for the South Florida chapter of Association of Legal Administrators. I'm a member of SHRM, Society for Human Resources Management, and I've served as a consultant and administrator liaison for the Florida Lawyers Network Group. Over the years, I've had the pleasure of developing an amazing professional network of colleagues and business partners, many of whom you will meet today, who time and time again proved to be resourceful and committed to supporting administrators, attorneys, and law firms throughout the country by providing some of the most updated technology, services, and ideas. Bottom line, a good administrator, consultant, and managing partner works hand in hand to provide attorneys and staff with the resources and support they need to succeed simply by understanding the firm's objectives and implementing procedures that improve efficiency, accountability, and profitability. Today's session will focus on managing and developing your law firm practice, and in this presentation, I will attempt to touch upon those issues and most frequently asked questions that tend to be a firm's greatest challenge and impact the bottom line. So let's begin. As you begin to establish and grow your practice, you'll find that these are the primary areas that drive your office and become the responsibility of managing your entire law firm. Human resources, financial management, facilities and project management, technology, marketing and business development, and essentially all day-to-day administrative, business, and operational needs as they arise, including conflict resolution. You need to ask yourself, what is my focus going to be for my firm? What are our strengths? What areas can we provide the best service and representation for our clients? That's why you need to know your strategic plan. Every firm should have a mission statement, basically explaining the reason you're in business. You should have a vision statement, which basically emphasizes the direction of your firm. You keep everybody focused on the ultimate goal, and even if there are changes in the operation, you have a vision that actually can motivate people and point them in the direction so that you all are on the same page as you point in a direction for success. Forming your firm culture is extremely important, and this is derived primarily with the people you hire, the goals you have in place, the talents, their level of professionalism, their attitude, their personalities. These all affect your firm culture. Next, let's talk about internal and external client relations. We all know what external relationships are and how important they are to our practice. But sometimes we seem to really forget how important the internal relationships are and the effect that they have on our business. Developing teams and communications, the way people work together, the way they interact, is extremely important in your day-to-day operations. This actually is part of your internal client relationships. One of the biggest challenges we face as administrators and law firms as a whole are those people who become very complacent. They're not innovative in their thinking or unwilling to change their ideas. And as times change, sometimes they are the ones that actually challenge some of our decisions. And finally, business and professional development plans, the most important factor of your practice, networking. Human resources, employment and labor law. You know, firms often experience problems as a result of not being familiar with issues or making a result of poor decision making, if you would, or failure to comply with laws that affect people in their workplace. It's critical that every law firm, whether you are one person or 100 people, that you have a policy manual that reflects your policies and keeps you compliant with the current updated labor laws. Employees should always sign and acknowledge your policy handbook, and you should always consult with a labor attorney before implementing any policy changes. When in doubt, when making a decision or in handling a particular matter, it's extremely important that you also contact your labor attorney for input. I just want to add a side note here. Being that you all are working for law firms, oftentimes I hear attorneys say, "We're lawyers, this is what we do." And they're not interested in maintaining the policies and procedures and having systems in place, and they want to deal with it as it arises. You need to watch what you ask for in doing that. It's not an approach that I recommend. The last thing you need as an attorney or a firm is the exposure or the time and the cost associated with a claim because you didn't follow the appropriate laws and procedures, or you were not in compliant with any labor laws. Down towards the bottom, for the purpose of time, these are some of the main areas of focus for today. There are many, many other laws that are associated that affect law firms, but these are the ones that we're focusing on that often tend to raise questions in conversation, and oftentimes firms don't know if they're doing the right thing or how to handle matters. You need to know if your firm qualifies for FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act. You need to maintain Fair Labor Standards Act. You need to maintain the compensation and wages, knowing who your exempt employees are. You need to know what an independent contractor actually is. Understanding the disability accommodations. Accommodating individuals that are disabled if they are able to perform the necessary or the essential function of the job, and the accommodation does not pose a tremendous hardship to the firm, it's something you should always comply with. Healthcare reform is another area, continuous changes that you need to be kept in the loop on. And most importantly, no one wants an EEOC claim filed against them for harassment or discrimination. These claims tend to be exceptionally costly, time-consuming, and it's certainly not something that the firm wants to undergo. However, one thing I do want to make a suggestion for on a side note is that your EPLI insurance, Employee Practices Liability Insurance, you may want to at some point review your policy and find out or check with your broker to see if an EEOC claim would actually be covered in the event of a claim. In a recent case, the policy basically stipulated that the policy covered the law firm for the employee or a former employee, and not necessarily the claim from an EEOC entity. Why? Because it was a outside government entity. And as a result, there was a lawsuit indicating that the claim was not covered under the EPLI claim policy. So you may want to go ahead and get that looked at. And finally, social networking. Social networking is becoming the way of the future. It is similar to what the impression or the impact we had when email came out years ago. A lot of firms are trying to ignore it. They're blocking people from using it. I think it's the most powerful tool, and the way you handle it is basically making sure that you have a policy in place that protects you and your firm and your clients in the event of any type of breach of contract or any type of breach of confidentiality. It's great for business development and firm recognition. A lot of the firms are now using it for trial. For instance, in the latest, the Casey Anthony case, they noted that social media was actually an important gauge used to evaluate the responses and get feedback from the public as to the response on the case while it was actually going through trial. And that's how they prepared their defense. So it is becoming a very powerful tool in the workplace. The disadvantages, as many of us know, are obviously productivity from our staff, security, it compromises our security, and also you have other potential liabilities, such as harassment and breach of confidentiality, as we mentioned. The greatest protection that you have as a firm, and your HR department should probably do this, is to make sure that you have an updated policy addressing social media and the repercussions, how it will be handled, and what's acceptable in your workplace. And in addition to that, even for your attorneys, it's strongly recommended that attorneys use social media for networking and business development, writing blogs and articles. And in doing so, it's very important that the attorneys or whoever is writing the article or the blog expresses an opinion and notes that it's the opinion of the individual and not that of your firm, to avoid any type of liability or claim. Law firm challenges. It's always best to think ahead and be proactive as opposed to reactive. In the last several years, even the last 5 years, there have been a number of changes that affect law firms and the way we do business. Most importantly, some of the more, should I say, we point out here some of the more frequently asked questions or concerns that law firms have is learning how to do more with less. And in the last few years, secretary-attorney ratios have shifted. The average mid-size firm, and this is firms that do billable work, have basically shifted their secretarial-attorney ratios 3-to-1. This is becoming more prevalent. And note that larger firms are actually at 4 and 5-to-1. It is a tremendous transition for a lot of you. It is doable. There are some tweaks and things that have to be done in order to make it work, and you have to have balance out your pairings. But with associates being more independent and firms learning to adapt to the changes, 3-to-1 is becoming more prevalent. And also with the technology. A lot of the attorneys are beginning to do their own work, and the role of the secretary and the legal assistant has shifted as well. Morale has been a big factor in law firms in the last couple of years. Oftentimes attorneys will say to me, the morale in the office is really down, people are dragging. I'm not sure what we're doing wrong, or what can we do to change it. It's most important that in our day-to-day activities that while we're focusing on our clients and our business, we also have to focus on the people and the teams that are going above and beyond to work for us. You need to recognize people's achievements, and these are some of the things that we fail to do sometimes just because the day is so busy and it's not our primary focus. We realize that this is their job, but it's very important that we recognize achievements and individuals that go above and beyond the call of duty. It's important to integrate people. The way you integrate them, interact them, give them a chance to be independent, make some of their own decisions and complete a task, showing levels of appreciation. The most important factor, especially during downsizing and economic times, is to try to minimize your turnover. Not only is it costly and time-consuming to recruit, train, and replace people, but it most certainly has an impact on the morale. And if you've been through a period where you've done layoffs or terminations or even done away with the departments or even restructuring, it seriously affects the morale of the office. And this is the way to go about interacting people and letting them know that you actually appreciate their work. Recruiting talent, it's most critical that you understand the needs and the skill sets for the positions you're hiring for. There should always be a training process for everyone in the office, and you should consider developing mentor-mentee relationships. That's for attorneys and staff. It's extremely important that people have a go-to person, and regardless of how large or small your office is, it's very important that people have an understanding of how to use your equipment and your technology, It makes them more efficient, and also it makes them more comfortable and assists in supporting you all in getting your work done as a firm. Integration and cross-training. Cross-training is probably the one thing that I think that firms tend to lack. Oftentimes we have an individual in the firm that we appreciate their work, we like the way they do things, or we can trust or know and rely that they're going to get something done in the spur of a moment. But folks, never have one person in a position, and I tell this to attorneys all the time, there should never be one person in a position that knows and does everything. You should never be in a situation where you have a role, anyone has a role, where there's only one person that knows the function of the position. You need to cross-train your people and develop the mentality that everybody works for the firm, not strictly just one individual or one department. When it's possible, cross-training will assist you when people are out. God forbid, illnesses. People are entitled to vacations, and one of the biggest mistakes that I see attorneys and firms making is when we're too heavily reliant on one or two individuals to get the job done. And not to mention, most of the time, they're entitled to vacations and they have the time. You need to afford them the time to use it so you don't have any employees that go through burnout. Next, we're going to focus a little bit on some tips regarding your financial management and profitability. Oftentimes, attorneys will ask me, I don't understand why it is we're not making the bills, or once again, we're pulling from the credit lines. I'm not sure what it is that we're doing wrong. Let me see. Here we go. The number one thing that I find as a hindrance in the law firm practice is that most firms that do billable time suffer from procrastination when it comes to this particular area. Time entries for attorneys and paralegals should be timely and consistent on a monthly basis. Firms need to establish a monthly schedule. They need to stick to it. And you need to have a date set for your pre-bills and a date set for when your final distributions will be sent out. You'll not only train your attorneys and your staff to respond to these deadlines, but you'll also train your clients so that they'll be expecting the bills coming in every month, and they'll also know that you're expecting a prompt payment. A lot of the questions that we get regarding time entries in law firms is how do we get people to do it? There's a lot of approaches. You can make it very competitive. One of the things you cannot do is hold people's paycheck. But what you can do is try to make it a competitive recognition game, if you would, noticing individuals that are actually doing it on a timely basis, recognize them, including it as a part of their performance evaluations, including that in their annual evaluations as a plus. Then again, for those that are constant and continuous offenders of this problem, one thing that one of the firms that I am familiar with used to do was they used to penalize the attorneys for not getting their time entries in timely. Every 3 days, there's no period where any more than 3 days should lapse before time was entered, and if that were the case, after 3 times, attorneys would be penalized. Partners would have to pay $100, and associates were paying $50. And when you get to the pocket of people, sometimes they seem to be a little bit more reactive. But one of the things that I wanted to share was some statistics that I thought you all would find very valuable. Attorneys who bill daily as the work is being done bill at approximately 40% higher than those individuals who enter time sporadically. There's less error, descriptions are much better, they're more concise, and the clients actually appreciate those descriptions. You have a better, you don't have to think back as to what you were doing, and you just have less room for error. But note that invoices that go over 60 days only have a 70% chance of being collected in full. After 90 days, your chance of collecting an invoice drops to 45%, and after 120 days, your opportunity for collection falls to 20%. The biggest mistake that law firms make, especially small and mid-sized firms. Time entries are pushed to the back burner, and if you want to be successful, your billing is just as important as your clients are. And if anything, your billing should be, in my opinion, one of your top 3 priorities. And if you're adjusting your bills or converting to flat rate billing, that's even more of a reason to make sure that your bills are done timely every month. Collections. During challenging times, oftentimes attorneys find themselves needing to increase their billable rates to increase their profits. But if you maintain your WIP, you'll earn a higher profit of margin without having to require an annual rate increase for your billable time. This is something that you truly need to think about, particularly during difficult and challenging economic times. So essentially, just in summarizing, time entry should be done, should have a deadline to them on a monthly basis, consistently every month. Attorneys can be penalized or rewarded as needed, depending on their participation in helping you meet your deadlines. You should oversee and really think about the statistics with your ability to collect in full when you leave invoices to the back burner, and also thinking about how you can adapt and not have to increase your rates on an annual basis will certainly affect you during a challenging market. Oftentimes I will get, particularly from small firms or small sole practitioners or firms that are just kind of starting out, they want to know if they need a budget. Who doesn't need a budget? If just like you would have a budget for your own personal expenses, it's very important, I think, that all firms have a budget, particularly if you want to grow your practice. On an average, I think it's extremely important that regardless of your practice area, you should know the life expectancy of a case from beginning to end within your office. You want to be able to know who your most profitable clients are, and it's important to know what it is that your client expects of you. Your realization and your utilization are going to be 2 different things, especially as times change. There are many things that clients are demanding that they don't want to pay for, and it's changing the way that we do business in our law firms. Overall, you will be considered very fortunate in doing very well if your realization rate stays around the 90 percentile range. For smaller firms, it's probably more geared towards 88%. But if you can maintain a realization in your firm for 90%, at a 90 percentile, you're doing very well. Frequently, attorneys and firms are always surveying what they require as billable hour requirements for their associates and for paralegals. The average and the ongoing rates at this point, or the expectations, are anywhere from $1,500 to $1,800. Now, for attorneys, that's a little more flexibility. I think it's a little bit more of the expected. For attorneys that do meet those billable requirements, a lot of firms tend to provide a bonus. For paralegals, however, I think oftentimes it is it's a target. If they don't reach it, they're not penalized. But certainly, once again, when you're doing employee evaluations and recognizing your staff, this is the time to make note of their performance and their success. Understanding and evaluating your variances from your target revenues, there's always going to be some unexpected expenses, especially since most firms do not plan for growth. There are going to be instances that cause you to have variances from your target revenues. Maybe you brought in a new practice area that you weren't thinking about, or unexpected growth expenses. These are all things that are going to affect your target revenues. And for those firms that are doing contingency, I know some of this is focused on firms that do billable hours, but there's also those that do contingency practices and work primarily with volume, such as a personal injury practice or a commercial litigation firm. In evaluating your profitability, there are many formulas that firms do use, but one that I've used over the years is with regard to looking at the teams and how you're structured. For instance, in this particular example, if you have a contingency practice, let's say a personal injury practice, and you are structured in a way where you have an attorney overseeing the caseload. It's an attorney, a secretary, and let's say a PIP clerk. The attorney earns $100,000, the secretary is at $50,000, and the PIP employee is earning $35,000. So altogether, their salary, and this is without benefits, of course, is at $185,000. They should be actually bringing in 3 times the amount of what the actual overhead is. So, for instance, if their salaries are $185,000 times 3, their earnings from the amount of cases, either from settlements or trials, the results should bring in about $555,000 a year, and that gives you some sense of comfort in knowing that your practice or your team is being profitable. So, essentially, 3 times the amount of your overhead, however you're structured, essentially can contribute, or is a good gauge, if you would, for profitability. The key overall is to avoid malpractice. You want to make sure that you have some systems in place to make sure that your cases have a tickler system and there's some sort of consistency in the way you're working on or monitoring your cases, and nothing falls through the cracks. Okay, next we're talking about internal controls. And the primary focus here, again, is to mitigate risk. This is a very, very serious area, and unfortunately, it's the one area that many people don't think about until, unfortunately, they experience something that allows them to have to, either a very costly experience or causes them to have to reevaluate and restructure their practice. Particularly in your financial departments, it's extremely important that you segregate duties and implement procedures that allow you to monitor financial activities so that you can avoid fraud or any type of misappropriation of firm accounts. Aside from having an internal employee, you should always have an outside CPA audit and oversee your accounting procedures to make sure you're in compliance. One person, one attorney, or one employee should never have sole responsibility of your entire accounting department. There should always be someone who can come in and spontaneously audit your accounts, such as your bank statements. Using an outside payroll service, requiring 2 signatures and approvals for salary increases and changes, this is critical. In many firms, I'd say even with small firms, over 60% of the firms are actually using outside payroll services. But the key factor is adjustments cannot be made to salaries or any type of changes without having approval of at least 2 signatures. And in any firm, there's no guarantees against fraud, but you need to do your due diligence and background checks. And for any individual that has authorization to handle your accounts or provide signatures on your accounts or handle overall any of your assets, it might be a good idea to bond those employees so that you have some peace of mind and recourse in the event of any misappropriations. For further information on this area, I'm sure the Florida Bar, Lomas section of the Florida Bar has a very, very wonderful and complete policy and breakdown of how these procedures can be followed for your practice. And I'm sure any of your local bar associations also in their ethics section will have a breakdown of how you should be handling your internal procedures with regard to accounting. This is something that you really need to make sure that you're in compliance with. Facility and projects management. This is an area that is just constantly changing. For one, people and rent, I'm sure as most of you already know, are your 2 greatest expenses. So it's very important that you start to review ahead of time when it comes to your lease, because it's a very costly part of your day-to-day business and your overhead. Negotiating your leases and contracts upon renewal. Always get a comparative quote and request for proposal. Don't just automatically renew. So often we just automatically renew because we don't have the time, but you want to make sure that there are no hidden charges, that you're getting some of the latest or the most updated equipment. And the one factor that people fail to consider is the service agreements. You have this great equipment, but who's going to service it, and do you have the appropriate service agreement or policy in place that allows efficient and immediate response time in the event of a problem, and who's required to maintain the systems. These things are not always mentioned or not necessarily discussed until after, when people realize they don't have the appropriate coverages. It's recommended that if your lease is going to expire, you have 1.5 to 2 years prior to the expiration of your lease that you should have, or at least start your search. Negotiating rates, a broker can assist you, and these days especially there's a lot of great deals out there that you can negotiate the rates, and also a TI allowance to renovate and restructure to accommodate your potential, perhaps your potential vision for growth. Always get feedback from other firms and colleagues on their experience with certain programs and technology, the vendors and equipment that they're using. It's very important to get feedback from other people that are using some of the same systems. Maybe it works in some practice areas or offices, and maybe it wouldn't work in yours. You want to check that out. And have a timeline. When you're doing projects such as a build-out or renovations, it's extremely important to make sure that you have a project manager or someone who has the time to oversee these projects. You want to ensure timely completion, because the one thing you don't want to be is in a situation where you have business interruption and you're not done or out of a location in a timely manner. And most importantly, particularly those people that live in Florida, having an emergency disaster and continuity plan is extremely critical. And it's reviewed annually with your managers and your staff. You need to know or have an understanding of how you're going to handle your business. What are you going to do? Where would you go in the event of an emergency? Are your files protected? Are you going to be able to work remotely? Do you have multi-offices that you can go to? Would you have to rent out space? And most importantly, how to protect your backup for your files. How to reach your employees and your staff in the event of an emergency. These are all extremely important factors to ensure business continuity in the event of a disaster. Technology is probably one of the most important aspects of our practice. Technology changes every day, as we know, but it is the one area that allows us to work effectively and efficiently and completely changes the way we do business. There's tremendous advantage in having the proper and the updated technology. Accounting equals efficiency, plus efficiency and productivity all ties into profitability. Unfortunately, over the years, one of the things that I've noticed is that with technology, it's one of a firm's largest investments, and we always seem to drag our feet or lack at the very end when it comes to training. That there's never sufficient training because we're so worried about downtime or not getting people from point A to point B or troubleshooting some of the problems. And we just want to get people functioning just to do enough to get the job done. It's pointless to spend so much money on all of these systems when you don't have people that actually know how to use the systems and training in place. And as firms change the way they do business, the technology is basically oversees all of our areas of word processing, time and billing, cost recovery systems, voice over IP, video conferencing, Skype, mobile devices. These are all of the areas that basically we attempt to bill our clients for. Now it's becoming more challenging to bill our clients for it, but it does allow us to be more accountable to our work, to our clients, mitigates risk in a lot of ways, but it also It also proves to be very costly in other ways, and we need to make sure that we have the latest and greatest information, because when it comes time to making changes, you need to have people that are innovative thinkers, and they're prepared to be as efficient and productive as possible. You want to have accountability. That's the most important part about your technology. Technology allows for accountability, and it mitigates your risk, and it's also important when you're hiring people and going through your growing pains. People then have the skill sets and the knowledge, and you want to be compatible. You want to be able to hire people that are updated and that you're updated as well, so that everybody can be transitioned easily. And one of the most important factors about our technology today is that you need to remember that all of your stored information, anything that you put in writing, is also is something that can be used in discovery. That includes your BlackBerries, your iPads, all of your portable devices, your emails. Everything is open for discovery. And finally, the concept of cloud computing. This is one area that a lot of firms, especially in economic times, it is cost efficient. It's beneficial in some areas, I think, and perhaps not quite so as others. But in having cloud computing, it's an off-site network or data center, and it supplies hosted services to a number of people to provide easy, scalable access to computing resources and IT services. It's a one point of access. It has its advantages because upgrades are handled automatically, and the service provider hosts both the application and the data, and the end user can use the service from anywhere. So it's more cost effective, it's reliable, it's secure, but there are still people that are not quite comfortable with it for all aspects of your technological needs, but it's certainly something worth looking into. Practicing law and managing your firm. Managing shareholders and sole practitioners especially have the challenge of practicing law, dealing with their clients, dealing with the bills and expenses associated with the firm, dealing with attorneys' compensation, and of course handling their cases and business development needs. As an attorney, if you and the shareholders find yourself in a position where you're struggling to meet your day-to-day administrative demands and practice law, that's when you know you need to consider hiring a legal manager, a consultant, or an administrator to assist you and point you in a direction. Usually anywhere from 8 attorneys or more, it's recommended that you start considering the needs, because you're going to start going through your growing pains. And that's about the time where you may want to start to consider bringing in outside help and managers that can assist you in taking care of the day-to-day business while you're out practicing, and hopefully networking and handling business development needs. If your vision includes in growing your firm, expect and prepare for growing pains. Legal managers can assist with the administrative needs, human resources, financial, and space planning, all basically translating into increased expenses for your firm. But this is all part of your growing pains, and you have to ask yourself, are you ready to do this? Can I do it alone, or do I need assistance? It's up to you and your firm to decide what's the best use of your time. Oftentimes I get questions from attorneys and law firms that ask, do I really need a legal manager? Can I afford it? If you are struggling, once again, to meet the day-to-day demands of your practice, you can't afford not to have a legal manager. If your files are going to get jeopardized, if your clients are upset and complaining, you need to really stop and assess your caseload and the mission and the vision of your firm. An example that I like to share is that recently I met with an attorney who was part of a large firm. It was a group of attorneys, I think about 6 attorneys, and they separated from a large firm during the economic downturn. And with a big firm, a lot of the administrative and human resources and financial responsibilities were clearly handled by various departments of the firm. Once they went out on their own, they decided, with only 5 or 6 attorneys, we're going to go ahead and handle it in-house. It's not something that the managing partner shouldn't be able to handle, but we're going to do it in-house and see where it goes. And after 3 months, they realized that they had no idea what was involved, and the time, the research, and the effort that was involved in dealing with just the day-to-day responsibilities, such as health insurance renewals, staff questions regarding your benefits, people coming in timely or not showing up into the office, handling vacation and sick time, or more importantly, being able to deal with some of the labor law compliance issues, which some of them, because they were not a labor law firm, they had no idea what to do. And the attorney actually called me and said, I had no idea what was involved and how much time this was going to take away from my practice. And essentially, they made the ultimate decision to hire a controller and an administrator to assist them with their various office needs. One of the concerns that I find attorneys have with regard to hiring a manager or a consultant is their concern about giving up control of the firm. Many attorneys, in fact, have parted ways with some of the larger firms because they want the more personalized touch, and they want to have better control of what takes place in their offices. Well, the question, why should I give up control of my firm, is kind of ironic. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. Attorneys are not giving up, firms are not giving up control. In fact, they're getting peace of mind, and you're going to gain control because you're going to have someone in place that's going to point you in a direction and help you keep apprised of your day-to-day practices and the issues. You gain organization and structure, and you have someone in place who can actually implement procedures for your firm. Administrators are accountable to the managing partners and to the shareholders. They conduct all research and requests for proposals. They have a reporting responsibility. They deal with all of the conflict resolution. And hopefully, a good administrator will negotiate your contracts and minimize your expenses and reach your objectives. The duties of a day-to-day legal manager are endless, and essentially the guidance of a good administrator or consultant, if anything, is going to save you money rather than cost you money. Next, we're going to talk briefly about some of the critical relationships that law firms and attorneys have or should have. Networking and business development is the function under which you are going to grow your practice. Unfortunately, in a lot of firms, they're not doing enough of it. Many firms rely on 1 or 2 people as the breadwinners to go out and bring in the business, and everyone back at the office handles the cases. But there are a number of relationships that are completely critical to your firm. The relationship between your firm managers and your administrators and your shareholders, it allows the attorneys to practice law, but yet you have additional eyes and ears in your office. But that relationship is extremely important. The relationship with your colleagues within and outside of the office is also critical. This is where you can also get some of your referral business. It's important that you maintain competitive and informed relationships, attending social events, fundraisers, and becoming a member of professional affiliations, gaining presence for yourself and for your firm. And most importantly, conversations and face-to-face time are those factors that generate into referrals, not necessarily sitting on the internet and business cards. Many times with the increase of social media usage, while it's a valuable tool, and writing articles and blogs are certainly invaluable to the firm, there's still the most powerful connections that you're going to make are going to be face-to-face. Your relationship with your clients also enhancing your referral business. Relationship with your vendors and your business partners. Oftentimes people will ask me, why is this important? This is critical because your vendors are also the individuals that are out on the market. They are the ones that are paving the pavement, and they are meeting with people on a day-to-day. They know what other law firms are doing. They can keep you apprised of what other firms are doing, what's competitive, what's productive, what works and what doesn't. They are probably one of your most valuable relationships as you attempt to upgrade and grow your practice. And again, we talk about social media and the importance of social media. LinkedIn is a professional site, blogging, Twitter, Facebook. Oftentimes, firms will ask me, should our firm be linked to these social media sites? And the answer is yes. I really do believe, in my personal opinion, that firms should take a stance and partake in social media. Most importantly, it's the way of the future. And I think it sends a message to your clients and to the community that you're up with the times, that you're making strides in your practice, and you're developing relationships in a way that many are going to sit back and perhaps take their time in doing because they don't think it's an effective or professional approach. The social media lead, so to speak, is one of the most powerful of all business development. However, it's not the only one, but it's the most powerful approaches for business development. And I think it's the time for taking it seriously. As we mentioned before, it's important to put policies in place, what's acceptable and not acceptable in your offices. People will utilize it whether you allow it or not, and I think it's a great time to embrace it and move along with the current times, and I think it'll make a tremendous impression on your clients and the community. And again, finally, employee and staff relationships. Your office staff is critical because they are the ones that can make or break you. Oftentimes we underestimate the importance of hiring good staff and good managers. But the most important thing that you can do is make sure that you're hiring people that have the right attitude, that are loyal and dedicated, and they're committed to a team energy, and they provide a good solid morale for your office. Because overall, at the end of the day, your staff is the one that's supposed to be there to make you look good. And that essentially leads to your valued clients. The relationship that you have with your staff has a tremendous effect on how your clients are handled, especially when you're not in the office. Next, we have the goals, overall goals, that law firms share when managing shareholders and administrators work together to try to provide a great environment and, most importantly, a successful practice. The result of having good management and leadership in your firm poses some of the following. The managers and the administrator essentially want to implement and oversee changes. They want to ensure that staff and attorney accountability exists. You're going to mitigate your risk. There's going to be tremendous knowledge of labor laws and updating policy manuals, financial reporting and controls, cost-saving initiatives and negotiating, recruiting talent, training orientations, comparative quotes, and requests for proposals with hope of reducing costs. Someone who's going to actually perform due diligence prior to hiring or conducting a merger with other firms. Conflict resolution. What about corrective counseling and progressive counseling before terminating an individual? Liaison between staff, attorneys, vendors, and clients. Maintaining a tremendous strategic and business development partners with your attorneys. Communication. Identify, recommend, plan, and support firm decisions and objectives, which are essentially part of your mission and your vision. And overall, having top-notch client service and representation, and obtaining and retaining the right talent. This, folks, is the result of having a good team, a management team, with a shared vision. And finally, the law firm success story. You can achieve the law firm success story when you have frequent, effective communication between your attorneys, managers, and clients, and everyone has to understand and be on board to support your firm's vision and mission. When you have systems in place that work, people are accountable in their roles, they're trained and they're working efficiently, and your clients are paying timely, then, and only then, you have a profitable, productive, and smooth-running office. And you can represent clients with a high level of confidence and professionalism and ethical standards. And in closing, in conclusion, keep in mind that administrators and consultants can make recommendations and decisions that actually coincide with your firm vision. Essentially, the goal is to manage a practice that leads a firm, its attorneys, and the staff to the next level of success. With a good legal manager in your corner, you have peace of mind knowing that you can provide clients with outstanding level of ethical and professional services while building a reputation and presence within your own practice. I hope you find this information helpful, and if nothing else, can take away some ideas that will encourage you to evaluate your current vision and practices. You should ask yourself, I know what works, but what could we do better or differently so that we can better represent clients, and more importantly, how can we increase our client base? Should you have any questions, or if I can be of assistance, I'm available in-house for hire and also on a consultant basis. You're also welcome to reach me at 954-683-3720 at sandra.d1066@aol.com. I may not have all the answers, but I'm resourceful and I can certainly make suggestions or point you in a direction. And also, I do speaking engagements for attorneys, staff, and managers, and available to assist should you need a speaker at your next firm meeting or retreat. Thanks for joining.